News Talk 830 WCCO. I'm Steve Simpson, in for Vanita here this morning on Minnesota's Morning News. Excited to talk to our next guest, who just set the record for longest space flight by an American astronaut. Spent time on the International Space Station a couple times, but he just returned most recently at the end of March of this year. He is a 1985 graduate of Benilde St. Margaret's, St. Louis Park, and also got his undergraduate in physics from St. John's in Collegeville back in 1989. He's a colonel in the U.S. Army. And other than that, he hasn't done much with his life. He is Mark Vande Hei. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us and welcome.
Thanks, Steve. That was a very kind introduction.
You've done a little bit of everything. I want to know first, though, when the idea of becoming an astronaut was something that appealed to you. Is this something that started in childhood, or is it something that came later?
Oh, gosh. It did not start in childhood, because I kind of thought that becoming an astronaut was about as mature an idea as becoming Spider-Man someday or becoming Superman. I just didn't think it was possible for someone like me. And then the first time I ever let myself get excited about the possibility was my very first assignment in the Army was as a platoon leader in Vicenza, Italy, for a combat engineer platoon. And the company commander, this infantry company commander, got a memorandum from Human Resources in the Army saying that NASA was looking for people to apply to be an astronaut, and it listed the criteria. And he handed me the memo because I had the minimum criteria. Other than, now that I look back, I probably didn't have, I think, if at least now we've got a 3-year requirement for experience after you get an undergraduate degree. That was too soon for me, but I spent a couple weeks kind of on cloud nine, imagining that this was a possibility, largely because someone handed it to me and said, like, this is the first time I actually thought about, here's the things you need to do. And I let that fade away because I realized that that was the minimum requirement to be competitive. There was a lot more to have to do. But honestly, even that made me think, I really would like to get a master's degree someday. And that was the first time I thought to myself, that would be cool to do too.
But I think that's interesting that it seemed out of reach, even for you with your physics degree and whatever, but it was just not something that entered your mind, not because you didn't think it would be cool or be great, but because you just didn't think it was within your reach.
Absolutely true. Yes.
Wow. That's interesting. All right. So this was your second time in space, as we said, and this is the one you broke the record, but you were there, I think, in 2017. You were there for, I think, 5 months. Is that right, on the space station?
Yeah, 168 days. I'm not sure exactly what that works out to.
So what was the experience like coming back to Earth after 5 months versus being up there for a year physically? Like what was different about your body? Compare those two times.
The biggest differences for me were not associated with how my body felt, because I think the second time around there were fewer surprises. The experience of the actual impact with the ground was very different. The first time I landed in February, and I remember when the parachute caught the wind again after we were on the ground, the spacecraft was upright, so the heat shield, where the heat shield used to be, was on the icy ground and on the tundra of Kazakhstan, and we could hear, as the spacecraft got drugged sideways, we could hear the scraping along the ice as we got pulled. But the spacecraft did not change its orientation. This most recent time, when that parachute reinflated, it drugged the spacecraft. It was April. No, it was actually late March. So there was no ice, and the spacecraft rolled. And in this situation where I really was not used to all these feelings, suddenly having the spacecraft rolling, I had no idea what was going on. Also, the first time I landed, I knew one of the things that they told us to do was make sure, because we hit hard, keep your mouth shut and your head in the seat before you impact, because you didn't want to bite your tongue.
Oh yeah.
And you didn't want to hurt your neck. Well, we landed after my first flight in clouds, so the search and rescue forces really couldn't see us very well, but we're still making an attempt to tell us you're going to impact in 10, 9, 8. And I think, if I remember correctly, at about 8 seconds, I took my head off the seat and looked at the data to see how far above the ground we were. And then right at that number 8, we hit the ground. So my head was not on the seat. I remember feeling like someone hit me in the back of the head with a 2x4, and my emotion was anger. The second time, I definitely kept my head in the seat, and I was braced for that really hard impact. And it wasn't because I was expecting it. I had so much anticipation for that. It didn't seem as big a deal. I thought, oh, well, there it was. And that was the end of it.
But that's interesting. But your body, I mean, kind of being back on Earth, other than the landing, your body was pretty much the same. You didn't see that big of a difference.
In both cases, I had definitely been in space for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And I was wobbly, but I don't remember a significant difference. And it might be because I don't remember with enough resolution how I felt after the first flight to compare with the second flight.
Well, let me ask you, because you trained for this obviously for months and months and years, whatever. When you first went to space the first time, was there something that surprised you or thought, oh, I didn't, even though with all my training, I didn't expect this? Maybe it was a sensation. Maybe it was something you saw. I mean, is there a story you can tell us about that?
Yes, absolutely. There's two things. One was approaching the space station. There's a periscope that gives the commander a view of the docking target on the space station. And that's just for us to be able to monitor that we're approaching on the right path. But the windows that we have are over our shoulders. And so you can't see anything but the blackness of space as you're approaching the space station until you get close enough where the solar rays that are so big, you actually can start seeing the solar rays. And seeing these golden solar rays, I just could not get over how big they were. And we do a lot of training in full-size mock-ups of the space station, but none of those mock-ups have the entire thing put together in one spot. And so I was just overwhelmed with the size of the space station, one. So the fact that we were able to put these things together in space and make such a massive, it's an orbiting port for a spacecraft up there in low Earth orbit was one thing I'll never forget, seeing that. And then the other thing was when I got time to look out the cupola, a window that faces towards the Earth but has views to the sides as well. With the Earth being sunlit in the foreground, it makes the surrounding space look inky black. It's the definition of black. It's the blackest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it makes the Earth seem very, very isolated. Now, when the Earth is not as well lit by the sun, so when you're in the shadow of the Earth and you're looking at the surface of the Earth that are experiencing nighttime, you can actually see the stars. And so it doesn't seem as inky black, but that first impression I had was just the inky blackness of space.
Mark Vande Hei is with us, astronaut Mark Vande Hei, of course, who broke the record for the person, the American who's been in space the longest at over, what was it, 353 or 355 days?
355.
355 days. While you were up there, a lot happened here on the ground, including the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. And there was some talk, and I remember covering this story, there was some talk, somebody made a quote unquote joke in Russia that maybe we won't go up and pick up the American astronaut. Maybe we'll just let him up there. Ha ha. And that we were like, oh, wait a minute. That's not funny. And then they said, oh, well, we were just joking. But that was a news story here for a couple of days. What did you know about that, if anything? And was there any concern on your part that maybe they were serious?
I really wasn't paying enough attention to social media to be hearing that in real time. And when I first heard about it, my wife talked to me about it while I was on an internet protocol phone call with her. And I thought it was so ridiculous, I started laughing. Quite honestly, I knew, so the spacecraft that I was going to return to Earth on was with me in orbit for 6 months. And that was the lifeboat, basically. So even if we had to leave early, we'd get on that spacecraft. My two Russian crewmates on that spacecraft are very good friends of mine. And the idea that someone would claim that they would leave me behind, there's no way I could possibly perceive that as reality. So I never got emotionally concerned about that possibility.
What was, and I know we just have a couple of minutes, I do feel like the bit from Saturday Night Live where Chris Farley is talking to Paul McCartney, because I'm like, oh, and that was so great when you were an astronaut. That's how I feel with you, because I grew up with the Apollo. You know, I'm a little bit older than you, but that was like such a thing for me, and just being so fascinated by space. So being able to talk to someone who's done it is just a really cool thing for me. So I just want to mention that to you. and also ask you, when you're up there and when you're so disconnected, literally and physically, from the world. You mentioned social media. What kind of ways are you able to keep up with things on Earth, or is it really disconnected? I mean, obviously, you're not on your phone all day because you've got other things to do. But how disconnected do you feel?
I think NASA does a really good job of helping us stay connected. Of course, the fact that I can look from a window, if I have enough free time, at the Earth really helps too. Being able to talk to my wife daily on that internet protocol phone I mentioned earlier helped a lot. I got to do a video conference with my wife and children once a week, and there were some special events where I got to do video conferences with groups of people with whom I had spent time with on the ground, and for other things too. So that certainly was fun to share the space station with people from that situation. As far as news, there's a really big difference between my access to the internet on the first flight and the second flight. There's a separate internet that the crew can use that's separate, completely separate from the operational information flow. That my first flight, it was so slow. In 6 months, I tried to use it one time and never.
Wow.
It was so frustrating. I never used it again. This second time, I was able to purchase presents for people. I could buy books, ebooks, and then have those on a tablet in orbit. I could get access to my music lists that I had purchased on the ground, and listen to podcasts in real time in many cases.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, we will let you go on that. Hey, do you want to go back? I mean, do you want to go back again?
I don't plan to go back again, but do I want to go back? I feel a lot of gratitude, a tremendous amount of gratitude for having been on the space station. And if they had told me that I needed to stay longer, I would have been very content with even that. However, I really like weather and rain and being outside, and I'm enjoying the opportunity to readapt to that. And I don't have a desire to go back right now.
All right. Fair enough. Astronaut Mark Vande Hei, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And thanks for being back here at home, I guess, where you spent a lot of time in your younger days.
Thanks. Great talking to you, Steve. Really appreciate your time.